Moonbase Blues is a Mothership community favorite, but its open-ended nature can make it intimidating to actually run. If you aren't careful, you'll find yourself caught off guard when your players inevitably ask, how did we survive a crash and wake up in a dome with no memory of it? I've refined 4 key areas: the start, mechanics, atmosphere, and escape, so you can stop second-guessing the logic gaps and start focusing on scaring your players. So looking at the start of the module, the players wake up in a blockaded security dome. And I suspect the most common way people run this is that the characters are Azure employees. To improve on this, you can use a hook that explains why this specific group of characters is working together. You can always veer away from the most obvious setup. For my table, I decided to frame it as a company doing an insurance audit of the base, which is a great idea I originally found on the Mothership subreddit. I did this for 2 reasons: continuity and context. First, it allowed players to bring in existing characters without forcing them into awkward Azure roles. It also solved the silence problem at the beginning. Since they were auditors, I could tell them, the protocols, that this silence is not normal. It immediately signaled the danger without having me to force it, allowing them to put on their auditor hats and react with more confidence to begin the story. The next big hurdle is the logic of the start. The module says they wake up in the dome, but there's a crashed ship outside. For my run, I decided to connect the wake up directly to the crash using a specific narrative beat involving their company android from the Nobody Wake the Bugbears playthrough of this module. I did this mainly for my own confidence as a warden. I needed to know that there was a solid explanation for why they were alive, so I wasn't caught off guard. I established that they were in cryosleep during the descent. This explains the grogginess. It also let me set up a horrific scene they may find later in the cockpit, where the pilot had been mesmerized and transfixed by the light, removed their restraints, and died on impact with the moon. But to explain how they got inside, their company android dragged them to safety. This wasn't just lore, it gave me clues that I could plant. I could describe the drag marks in the moon's dust leading to the dome, and when they find the android in the security dome, dismantled for its blue coolant, it closes that loop and sets a terrifying tone immediately. The final piece of this setup is the gear. The module is brutal here, so there's only one PC loadout available for all the characters. You need a way to distribute that gear that feels fair but dramatic, so I had everyone roll a D100. I did this to solve the introduction problem and the gear problem at the same time. I ruled that characters woke up in ascending order of their role, which gave each player the spotlight to introduce their own character and react to the scary silence of the dome first. Then I ruled that the highest role was the one who woke up last, but with the single loadout. This was great because it forced a social moment immediately. Does the teamster keep the revolver or do they toss it to the Marine? And for everyone else, they felt vulnerable since they didn't really have the map yet. They didn't know much about where they were. Their immediate goal wasn't escape. It was just find something to protect themselves. The next thing you have to prepare for is the engine of the module, the light. The module tells you to roll for exposure, but it doesn't define exactly how much light triggers a roll. Players might try to negotiate with you. I only looked for a second, or I was squinting. To keep the horror sharp, I made a specific ruling. The moment even a tiny bit of light hit their eye, even for a split second, that counted as exposure. I did this to remove the ambiguity, and it establishes the light as an absolute threat. But knowing if they are exposed is only half the battle. You also have to know how bad the exposure is. The module tracks this as a countdown, where hour 0 is when the meteor is directly overhead. My advice is to track this for yourself, but never say it's hour 2 to the players because it's meaningless. If I'm at hour 2, I know the meteor is just below the moon's horizon. So I tell the players the horizon is glowing a neon blue. If we hit hour 0, I know it's directly overhead, so I can say the light is hammering down like a blue midday sunshine. There's no shade anywhere. This way, the players are reacting to the environment, but I know exactly how much exposure there is to apply. It keeps the mechanics hidden, but the danger very real. That said, you have to be ready for them to try and outsmart the light mechanic. I actually had a player who closed his eyes and crossed the surface of the moon, hiding under a tent and only looking to get direction. I didn't really want to say no to this idea, but I didn't want them to be perfectly safe either. So I decided to use less frequent indirect exposure rolls when they took a look for directions. I did this to reward creativity without killing the tension. I only made them roll occasionally for light leaking through when they opened their eyes. They were safer than walking out in the open, but they still felt the pressure that was the light trying to get in. Although it didn't prevent a mad media colonist sneaking up on them. By the way, if you don't want a mad media colonist sneaking up on you, take a second to protect yourself, hit that like button, and subscribe. Now, let's talk about the atmosphere. The third challenge is selling the atmosphere. The central hook of the module is that the light makes people obsessed with the color blue. But if you just keep saying he's staring at a wall, it gets a bit repetitive and loses its impact fast. I thought about anything in a base that might be blue. Blue ink in a pen, blue covers on writing pads, blue cleaning products, and even blue medical equipment. I did this to ground the horror. When players see a scientist ripping open a pen and drinking the ink, it feels visceral and gross, and it turns a magical alien mind control into something that looks like a gritty, desperate addiction that makes the madness feel tactile. Then you have the colonists themselves. My advice is to play them socially first and aggressively second, which is hinted at in the module. I had the infected colonists completely ignore the players at first, too focused on the meteor to care about others. I did this to create unease. There is nothing creepier than walking into a room of people who refuse to acknowledge you because they are too busy staring into the sky. It shows the players that these people aren't just monsters. They are gone. It builds massive tension, making the encounter feel like walking through a minefield. The players are terrified that one wrong step could be the trigger. Before we look at how to end the session, I want to give you 3 specific tools I used to run it. First, the mechanics bay survivors. The module writes that a group of survivors are hiding out in the mechanics bay, but they are just NPCs. My advice, stat them up as full player characters before the session starts. Moonbase Blues can be lethal. If a player dies, you don't want them to pause the game and lose immersion. You want to be able to hand them a sheet for Rublev, the head of security, immediately so they can jump straight back into the action. Second, the maps. The module comes with some functional layouts, but for virtual tabletops you want atmosphere. I highly recommend the Lazarus map set for this module. They add that gritty, lived-in sci-fi texture that helps players visualize the domes. Third, the audio logs. The silence of the moon is scary, but breaking it is scarier. I used the Azure Daily Tasks audio recording from the Nobody Wake the Bugbear playthrough, and so playing a cheerful corporate announcement over the speakers while the players are exploring with trepidation through a silent environment creates a perfect contrast. It makes the environment feel lived in and hollow at the same time. I've linked all of these resources in the description below, and while you're down there, consider subscribing if you want to see more videos like this one. The final hurdle is the ending. Since Moonbase Blues is open-ended, there's no big flashing arrow pointing to the exit. To avoid this, you need to seed the escape routes. Players obviously know they can't stay here, but without clear targets like the rover or the satellite, they tend to hesitate. Giving them specific destinations stops them from cautiously checking over every door and encourages them to move with purpose towards an objective. There are 2 main ways off the rock: the rover in the mechanics bay to winch out the ship, or calling for help via the comms satellite. I made sure to drop hints for these in a security command center in the first dome. When they found the map, I didn't just show them the layout, I explicitly pointed out the main airlock for the domes was massive and built for heavy vehicles. I did this to create a split objective. Immediately the players start to discuss, do we go for the car or do we go for the phone? And that sets the players in motion and stops them from wandering aimlessly. Once they have a destination, the horror takes care of itself. The module has a creepy mid-game that's really fun to run. I've dropped the links in the description below for all of the resources I mentioned, including the Lazarus maps and the audio logs. So click the links there to grab those now, so you're ready for when you run Moonbase Blues. If you haven't picked it up yet, I also have an affiliate link down below. It's a great way to support the channel while grabbing a great Mothership module too. And finally, if this breakdown helped you prep for your session, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. It really helps me out and lets me know that you want to see more Warden guides like this one. So, good luck out there, Warden.